Okay, I want to welcome everybody here today and say hello and thank you for being here. I so appreciate everyone here and your support and your friendship, and it means a lot to me. And I particularly want to point out how universal Jeanette and Nelson are, because we have a young girl here, Silvana, who's brand new. She's in her early 20s. She saw Maytime, right? And then she got hooked. And then we have Renee here, who will be 87 in about a week, next Saturday. And Renee flew here for the first time to the United States to just come to this meeting. So there's the range of fans, and this is how we see the future of people of all ages who discover their amazing films and music. So I'm really glad to have everybody here and to have people still enjoy their work and newly enjoy their work. I wanted to point out, normally my daughter Juliet's here. She's been traveling with a job she has now, and she recently came back from Japan, and she's been all over the place, and she's having a lot of fun right now. So that's why she's not here, but my sister Arlene came instead, my younger sister Arlene, and she's here, and she's going to come up and speak in a minute because she has a short story to tell. And I also wanted to explain that what we're going to be doing with the magazines, I made a decision last year because of the postage costs, and it was costing, Renee can vouch for it, I send over magazines to her, they're like $35 to mail Global Priority, and it has not been cost effective for a long time to just have a regular quote-unquote membership fee with the cost of shipping going up and up. So what we're going to be doing as we started this year is that as each magazine comes out, I will let everybody know. They can just order the magazines, and each magazine will then be self-sufficient, and we can continue to operate that way. And I will also make them available as ebooks, so people who live outside of the U.S. who would prefer to just read it on their iPad, they can do that as well. And I think that will work quite well. And so we're doing that starting with the next issue. And I had to brag because Tracy is so amazing. She colorized the last picture for us, and I printed out, I didn't quite get this journal done in time for this meeting because I've had a couple of other things that came up that I've been working on, but I just wanted to show you the picture that she did for the next cover. Thank you, Tracy. Just give her a hand. She's doing a beautiful job with these. And it's going to be wonderful because this year is the anniversary of both Girl of the Golden West and Sweethearts. So, 80th anniversary, hard to believe. Okay, the first thing I want to do is just have Arlene come up and tell a story, which I didn't actually remember. I mean, I guess your head can only fill with so many stories. But Arlene, why don't you come up and tell your story? Okay.
Oh, hello. You know who I am. What I was telling Sharon recently is that she forgot that I also worked at the Motion Picture Hospital. Our father was the CPA for one of the top execs there, so he helped me get a job. So I actually was working in accounting while she was being a candy striper. So I remember one day, like I was in the accounting area, but I was able to walk around the grounds and whatnot and see people. So one day I actually went into Blossom's room when Sharon was in there and they were visiting, and Sharon introduced me to her, and it's like I know that she had had a stroke, but I could totally understand her. We had a nice conversation, and Sharon was at that point writing her first book. She wanted to write a book about somebody, so Blossom was having her do it with Jeanette, and she had provided Sharon with a whole bunch of pictures. So they were going through the pictures, and Sharon published that book when she was 19. She was in the newspaper. It was very cool. Anyway, so it was just a nice little visit that we all had together, and she was a very nice lady, and that was my story for that. Yeah. There you go. But, I'm going to tell you something else. She's really kick-ass, okay? Because, like, my sister, too bad, I get 5 minutes here. When I was growing up, she was such a nerd. She would only read books. She would never do anything. Like my younger sister, we were all into the every normal day things, and all she did was read. But, and the amount of people that, like you, to me, I think it's amazing. Oh. Anyway.
Thank you, Arlene. See, I'm not the only sentimental one in the family. And our sister Julie also met Blossom, and I brought her over to the house. I remember we baked something once. I think it was when the peach tree came ripe, and Mom was all about, we have to use up all the peaches, so we had to make a whole ton of peach pies. I think I brought Blossom over to the house once and helped, and we did that. So anyway, okay, so now I made a note here. Something about, okay, the driving tour, okay. So this year, I always say I'm never going to do another LA driving tour, and that's why I wrote this issue, which is issue 72. It has all the homes, all the landmarks, all the backstories, what to see, where their stars are on Hollywood Boulevard, their graves, the locations, and I figured I'll do this so I don't ever need to do a driving tour again. So what happens is every year there are new people who come and they want to do a driving tour, and so we do a driving tour every year. So we did so again this year, and every time we do that, something amazing happens. Like one time, Tracy got us into one of Nelson's houses. We just went right in. Another time, Maria was with us at Twin Gables, and she went up to the gate, the door opened, and we just went in. The sliding gate opened, and of course the house was gone, but we were on the grounds. And so we've had another time, we had the experience at the Halvern house, Nelson's house that he had built originally for himself and Jeanette. Didn't quite work out, but okay. The one that he sold to Fred McMurray. Anyway, the owner showed us that house as well, and we saw the backyard, etc. And this time, we went to Ashdale Place, Nelson's last home, the one that he bought in 51 and technically lived there till the end. And we had another experience this weekend with that tour. So I thought I would invite Gail, who was on the tour with us, to come on up and share what happened there, because that is another eye-opener that you never expect you're going to learn about. So Gail, come on up.
I have to say, this has been a wonderful experience for me. I'm a new member, January I think it was, but I have been a fan of Nelson and Jeanette's since I was 7, when I discovered them and fell in love. And my big thing was to beg my mother so that I could stay up at night to be able to see the movie. And they have been in my heart for all this time, long time. And so a few years ago, I lost my mother and really took it hard. And the thing that sustained me, got me through it, calmed me down, gave me joy, peace, was to watch their movies again. And that really brought me to look for more on the internet, which brought me to Sharon, and then I had a few questions, and so kind of that's the story, and that's why I'm standing here. So, but it's been wonderful, and Sharon, I can't say enough about how dedicated, how passionate, how loving. You just give of yourself to such a degree that it's really awesome, and I just want to say thank you, because you brought me even more joy. So, oops. So back to the tour. It was a great tour. It was really very interesting in so many ways. And so it was almost the last stop, I think it was. And we go into this nice neighborhood all the way up to the top. And come to this house, and there's a gentleman working on something in its garage. And so there was this discussion about, well, should we park? So I said, well, wait a minute. I'm just going to go up myself and see if we can see the property. Well, the gentleman was so nice. He was phenomenal and just really very enthusiastic about Nelson. And so we were able to see the house. The house itself, it was interesting. It's beautiful grounds. Not a big house, not, anything, but it was a nice house. And so we were able to go around the property, mainly in the back, because the house itself is pretty much you can't see that it's falling apart from the outside, but there are several places where you just know it's a matter of time. And so we got into a discussion with David, and he was so generous with his conversation and was able to tell us a lot of things about just, he inherited it. His parents had bought it in 82? 82. And so he had a lot of kind of tidbit information, and he also talked about someone who is a friend that knows someone that knew all about that house and what had transpired. And one of the comments that this fellow made was, well, I don't know much about it, but I know that he brought one of his girlfriends here all the time. So
the woman he was having an affair with.
Yeah, that was his words. So, but the house itself is almost, you could say, two sections. When you look at the house from the front, you'd see two sides to it, and then the door, and then there's two long windows. Well, one window is a false window. It's actually, I wouldn't say boarded up from the inside, but it's covered. And it's not really a working window. It's just a frame to make the house look uniform. From an architectural standpoint, it needed that other window. And then above, there are, just under the roof line, there are small windows. Well, we found out that you can actually get up there and walk through most of it. He said that his parents never went up there. They kind of got rid of whatever was there when they bought it in 82, but there was someone who also owned it in between Nelson and his parents, and they bought it through an estate, through an estate type sale. But it was a lot of the original plantings and outbuildings. There was one where originally he said that Nelson used it as a singing and dancing studio. Well, it was interesting to hear about the dancing, but and at the time, what did he say? It was like a flat type patio, not much of more than a.
It would have been his art studio, because he did a lot of painting. And in the couple years that he was broken up with Jeanette, he had a lot of models come.
Okay. Let his imagination run. Okay. So as in the backyard, on the one side was Anne's section, and that had a master bedroom and bath and so forth. And then on the other side was an area that was Nelson's, and you went around a side door, and there was like a driveway with a wooden gate that you could go up. But it was so totally separate, and there was a separate entrance for him on that side, but it was supposed to be a maid's quarters and a butler's quarters, and was it one or two baths? I don't remember. It might have been one bathroom. But each one had a separate door, so you had to go through 4 doors to get to Nelson's private area, where he slept and had his little house and entertained. And so it was fascinating that in the middle was sort of the, don't want to exactly say common area, but the area that separated completely the two sides of the house. And again, there were 4 doors before you got to Nelson's quarters, and it was curious as to why there would be so many doors that you'd have to go through, and I suspected it was because if anyone came in, they had to go through 4 doors, and it gave him a little bit of time to get together. So it was fascinating. Outside, the backyard is beautiful. There's a hot tub type pool, which was not there when Nelson lived there. It was built afterwards. And then you go further down the backyard, and there is a 2-story house, which wasn't a 2-story when he lived there.
It was just the one.
1 story. So it's on the slope as you go down. From there, you can see out across the valley. It's a beautiful, beautiful view. And the gentleman, as I said, was so nice to really get into a lot of our conversation. And what he said, he inherited it. He had architects come in to see what could be done to preserve the house, to bring it back to original. And there were so many issues and so much potential. I don't know if you've ever been through a renovation of an older house, but what happens is that you say, okay, I've got this budget I'm going to establish, and I'm going to break through this wall and do this to shore it up or whatever. Well, you get through that wall and you find out that the pipes are all rusted away or whatever. So it's something where you don't know how much you're going to spend. You can get in there and not get out with what you wanted to get out with. So he is obviously, from our long conversation with him, very torn about totally leveling the house or restoring it. The difficulty comes in that the property itself has increased in value to such a degree that someone coming in there could buy the land anyway, and they could say, all right, yes, we're going to preserve it, and then decide to demolish it. And so it's, he's back and forth on it. He pretty much indicated that it really wasn't worth rebuilding, and that he almost had to be sure that if anything was going to be preserved of the feel of the home, the outside landscaping or whatever, that he would have to do that. If he sold everything completely, they would probably not leave much land built upon land there, because the value of the property has gone to such a degree that they're going to build probably a 15,000 square foot house. And that's the conundrum, is that you want to preserve it, but at the same time the value has gone so high that eventually, if he sold it, whoever comes next is probably not going to have the same sentiment. So I think we probably have, at best, maybe 3 years of the house being as it is, and after that he'll either build his own house on it, or somebody else will put it up, and we'll have another spot where we have memories and pictures. But it was very, very positive, very, very positive, and his thoughts and input as far as some of the stories, and I'm sure that he and Sharon are going to be sharing a lot of stories that we can hear about later. But it was great, and it was a really, really good tour. And actually, I think you should hire a bus because I think there are a lot more people who would like to go, but we can't do anything, small. I had the vision of, they do this. They put this screen on the car, the bus, whatever, and you put it whatever you want on it. So we should have little pictures or big pictures of Jeanette and Nelson on it, and advertise that we still love them very much. And it was great. Next time you have to convince her, yes, she has to do it again in some way. Thank you.
Dale. That's what I mean. You never know what you're going to run into and what the adventure is going to be. So that was our adventure. Okay, so today we have an interesting new guest, and I thought the way we would do it today, it'd be easier to sort of do a question and answer with her, and so we will probably move this aside and just set up 2 chairs and go back and forth, because she has some amazing news stories that, news stories that are new to us, and that's why I'm glad Woody and Brooke were able to come today, because our guest is June Caldwell, and she was Woody Van Dyke's last secretary the last 2 months of his life, and she helped plan the funeral, and she, knows a lot about, anything that we can learn that adds to what we know about Woody is always appreciated, because we all love him here. And so I want to give her a welcome. Do you mind telling us your age?
No.
You're 93 and a half years old. So let's move everything aside and set up, and we'll continue. Yes.
I just want to say that I appreciate everybody's interest in those days, because they're long gone, and the artists that we appreciated so much through the years and their ability to entertain, of course, is gone. But it's wonderful to see that side of Hollywood, because I was recently at the Turner Classic Movies festival they had in Hollywood. It's at the Grauman's Chinese Theater, what's left of it. And if you see the people that are hanging around on the street outside, it's really discouraging what I've seen happen to Hollywood after all their beautiful years. And to walk down the street and see people out there preaching and in these crazy costumes, and it's such a bad atmosphere for the younger people to come to Hollywood and to see that instead of the beautiful area it used to be. How beautiful Sid Grauman's theaters were at one time, and the premieres. And I walked down the street and went to dinner at Musso Frank's, which is still a busy, jammed area in Hollywood. And to see what's going on in the street is disgusting. I don't know if any of you go up there, but I just wish they would clean up Hollywood and do something about it, because it's a show place for the rest of the world to come to and to see. And if you go up in the hills at Jamashur Gardens and the Magic Castle, there's so much potential that could be beautiful there now. Of course, the Academy is building a museum at Wilshire and Fairfax, and that's going to be a show place that people can go to, which I hope they'll show costumes and tell you how films are made and everything.
Yes.
And give a good impression to the world.
Yes, that's what they should do.
Yeah.
Will you tell us how you came to work at MGM and how old you were?
Yeah, I was born in Culver City on Main Street in a doctor's office, and I grew up on Madison Avenue and 2 blocks from the entrance to the studio. So I could go up there and see stars coming in and out and get autographs if I wanted to. They would stop at the stop sign there and open cars and see people. It was a wonderful place and very inviting for someone that was young wanting to work there. So I went to grammar school and high school. All the streets in Culver City were used for locations. on occasion. And they had the crew there and all the cameras, and the principals were in front of the houses on the street. They used all of that to make films in the early days. And that would have been MGM started in 1915 with Thomas Ince, which I was explaining earlier, and two other gentlemen. And that's what started the Lot 1 that's still standing there. Washington Boulevard. It was 10102 Washington Boulevard, still the same address, at the corner of Jasmine and Washington. Sony Studios are the people that own it now. So I went to grammar school, high school. When I graduated, my sister was working at MGM. She was retiring because she was pregnant, and I had the opportunity to get a job at the studio, and within 6 weeks, once you got into the studio and worked as a messenger delivering mail and taking tours, you could transfer into any department that you wanted to work at. If you wanted to work in journalism, you worked in publicity. If you wanted to work in advertising, you'd go there. If you wanted to be a film editor, you could go work for the projection department and you learned your trade. If you wanted to go in construction, if you were talented at drawing, you could go in the art department. If you were interested in production, you could go in there as an ingenue and learn what you wanted to. So that was the opportunities that were open to everybody. There was no union that said that a certain amount of people, could come in and others couldn't come in. So we all had the opportunities to learn a trade, and I had studied shorthand and typing, and I was an office worker then. So I went in as a messenger for 6 weeks. I learned all 7 lots that we had, and it was wonderful because I had an understanding of the overall where everything was at the studio. And then going into an office, I knew where to send things. Whatever I was asked to do, I knew where they were located, or I could walk there and get to them. We had a sound stage that was called 1A, where all the music was done. The recording for Janet McDonald and for Nelson Eddy was done on the sound stage, just the voices with the orchestra. This is what eventually worked out because it was easier for the people to work with an orchestra, to be with the musicians, than it was to be singing alone on a stage without all the music that you needed. So it was wonderful because if you got in there, you could watch all of this. When I was in high school, it was interesting because my sister belonged to the studio orchestra at night that were just the workers of the studio. If you played an instrument, you could join the studio orchestra at night and rehearse with them and play. And we did, once in a while, we'd do a show up at the E-Bell on Wilshire Boulevard, various locations like that. We had a concert master that directed us called Oscar Radin, and he worked in the music department. So he gave us time to rehearse and do that. And it was interesting because my playing the violin, I was able to play with them, and this was just when I was in high school. But it was interesting because the studio was open 24 hours. They worked all night, making the sets acceptable for the director the next morning, whatever they needed. Furniture was moved in. The people came in at 6 o'clock in the morning to have their hair done, to have makeup done, and then they were ready to start shooting at 7, 7:30, 8 o'clock. This was a routine normally. The only one that was an exception that I knew of was Judy Garland. She had it in her contract that she wouldn't start shooting until 11 o'clock. And this was something they agreed to because she was so talented. This was after she was having problems and everything later on. The movie was Annie Get Your Gun, and Irving Berlin had written it. She had gone in for her costumes, and everything was ready to start shooting. And I know this because I worked for Mr. Mannix, who was head of the studio, and she never showed when she was supposed to be there. And this went on 3 to 4 days. Finally, they called her in and said, "You're finished." And that was the end of her career at the studio. And Irving Berlin did not want anyone else to shoot the picture except Judy Garland. He had other issues. Anyway, finally, it was shot with Betty Hutton, and she did a marvelous job. She was exceptional with that, but he did not want it released. And the man that I worked for later on, around 2000, we were able to get the rights from his family to release the picture. Otherwise, it was never going to be released. That's the only reason anybody's ever seen it.
Wow.
Anyway, that's the story of how I got started in the studio. And I just had the good fortune of living in the area and having the opportunity and enjoying it all through the years. So that was
And how did
that's my memories of the studio.
That's excellent. How did you come to work for Woody then?
My sister had been there for 5 years with Florence Thomas.
I knew Florence.
Florence Thomas, yes. She was Armenian. Yes, very strong woman. And she did a wonderful job, very efficient. She was the script clerk, and she watched the script, the dialogue, to see whether the actors, the actresses were saying the correct words, whether they had gotten in all the dialogue. She watched all of this on the set, would take care of that part for Mr. Van Dyke. And they would sometimes change the dialogue. She went to the script department and saw that the pages were all changed and they were correct. And they also had to time everything. We had a edict from L.B. Mayer that every film should be an hour and a half. It was 90 minutes. That was all they were. And we had a head of the editing department by the name of Margaret Booth, who was the head of all of the film editors. And the film editors did not like Margaret Booth very much because every piece of film that they wanted in there, they wanted left in there. They didn't want it on the cutting room floor. Margaret Booth would time. She had a secretary, Dorothy, and she would time that to the hour and a half, and that was it. Because maybe some people will remember, but when I first went to the movies, it was 2 features, shorts, a newsreel, a cartoon. It's what you got for your money. Whether it was 25 cents going to the matinee, 50 cents, whatever it cost you, you got 2 films. And they also gave away dishes on certain nights.
What month did you begin working? Was it
October 10th, 1942.
Okay. So,
I was 17.
wow. So, he had finished Journey for Margaret.
He had completed the shooting, yes. And I started my 18th birthday on December 2nd. And that was my first day with him. And it was not easy because I didn't know the names of the people involved. other than his and Florence, and people would call in and leave messages. I had to get all that correct. And then also answer the correspondence and get answers that they wanted from the various departments. He had a big crew that were with him. He had a man from production, a man from sound, a special film editor, all of these things. So he was used to working with this crew all the time, and they dearly loved Mr. Van Dyke. They respected him and enjoyed being with him. He had a lot of admirers.
Yes. And
Yeah.
will you describe what he looked like then and what his personality
Well, I'd like to
was?
show you the picture I have of him.
Yes.
This will show. He was movie star beautiful. He was.
Do you want me to hold it up for you?
This is in his Marine Corps outfit. And he was a good-looking child actor at one time. His mother was an actress. This was, he was 53 when he passed away. And 42, if you remember, was the beginning of World War II. And all the men at the studio had been enlisted in the service. Woody wanted to be in the Marines, and they wouldn't accept him because of his health condition and his age. So he recruited for the Marines. He would drive from MGM down to Camp Pendleton and back all the time. I understood this, and of course, that took his interest at that time as much as working at the studio. And he was in post-production, and they finished and they released the movie after he passed. It was very, very tough to handle the office when the day that he died, because the men were crying. They were very upset and very emotional about it. He had a big funeral, and he was remembered very well by. I've never heard anyone say anything against him. Never. It was.
And you said that he had Janetta Nelson officiate and sing?
Yes, officiated at his service, and singing and talking.
Talking about him?
Yes, talking about him and the joy of working with him and being friends with them. Very outstanding relation, and I'm sure they remembered them to their dying day.
Yes.
He was part of their life.
Did you have any inkling at the time that he was ill, that he was not well?
No, because my impression of him was the way he was. I didn't see changes in him. No, he was on his feet until he passed.
Right.
He took care of himself to the end. So I can't see that I felt he was emaciated or suffering. He didn't say anything about it.
You probably wouldn't have anyway.
I don't think so.
Right.
Tough. He was tough.
Yeah.
So it was a delight to have been associated with him, and it was extremely interesting to know the department heads and to know how the operation came together, when you were shooting a picture, how everybody worked together.
He was supposed to make another film afterwards. He was going to try to make another film. It never happened. Do you know anything about that?
No, he had quite a few scripts. He could have been called off of anything and assigned to something else because he was capable of making Joan Crawford behave. And we dealt with Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz and Greer Garson and Walter Pidgeon and you name it, personalities. They were all. Lucille Ball could get very upset, infuriated. In fact, she was very upset one day and called Mr. Mannix, and he said, "Come right up." And she left the set and came up there. And he had a main office where his desk and bookcases and everything were, and then he had a side office with a desk and a couch and this and that. He took her in there and he poured her a drink. And she had a drink with Mr. Mannix and she calmed down completely. He called the set and whatever he said and did, why, he straightened out whatever it was that was infuriating her. And her whole complexion and everything else changed when she went back to work. This way she was a little bombastic.
Did you see Ruth and the kids afterwards?
No, I didn't see them at all. And she wasn't a person that I saw at the studio at all. A lot of the wives that came to the studio, and you would see them in the commissary or with them, but no, I did not see them. Florence would have been the one that went to the house. And Florence was married to a man, and they moved to the desert near Palm Springs, and he flew a plane, her husband, and they traveled, and they enjoyed, I think it was 29 Palms or something like that were out, by Palm Springs is where they, and she passed, and I remember they had a child too. Florence had a child that passed away, sadly, in his teens. Anyway, Florence had passed away, and Eldon lived there by himself until he passed away.
Yes, that's where she was living when we interviewed her.
Connection with the family, so I didn't know what happened to your mother or grandmother after that. But he was a dynamo. You can be proud in every way. So I wish that in the future that Hollywood gets straightened out, and that's what I could hope, and people have good memories of it. Because it sure isn't much now, I don't know. That's my impression.
Would you tell us about the Dude Ranch story, a happier story?
Yeah, I was about 18, 19, and I went up to a Dude Ranch. It's still there. It's called Alisol Ranch. It's a ranch that you go to and you eat family style in the restaurant, and you can ride horses. They have cowhands there that help do cowboys. And they have a big pool, and it's just very enjoyable spot. And my girlfriend and I and her mother went up there, and we woke up in the morning to go over and have breakfast before we went out riding. And I started to step out, and there was a stoop here, and there was this huge spider tarantula that was just sitting right there. Scared me, and I screamed. And this man was coming around on the sidewalk, and he ran over to me, and he looked, and he saw what I was looking at, and he went and got a big piece of lumber off of the fence over here, and he squashed this big thing. Anyway, my thoughts were, I can't imagine that coming into our bedroom, which was right there. Anyway, it turned out to be Nelson Eddy.
He saved the day.
He saved the day with that.
I'm mounting again.
Yeah. He was there enjoying a weekend or a few days, I don't know how many days, But anyway, he was so pleasant and so nice and friendly and lovely looking. He was there with his wife, and we had a place that people gathered at night and music playing and dancing. And he was there with his wife and talking to people and enjoying himself.
That's great. It's a
Yeah.
wonderful story.
They had horses you could go out and pet. And, you know, it was just like a regular ranch is what it was. And he enjoyed that. It's still there today if you ever want to visit, ALISAL. You can probably look it up on the internet.
Girls, do you have any other stories that I have not asked her about yet that she should talk about?
What was the prank you said Woody Van Dyke pulled with the truck and the dogs? You were telling us
The
earlier.
one?
The prank Woody Van Dyke pulled with the truck, and then his friend retaliated.
Yeah, they were always pulling pranks. Jeanette McDowell was quite a kidder, too. She got in the doghouse with him because she didn't show up on the set. One time, that's in the book, yeah. She didn't show up on the set, and so, anyway, it was because her hair was wet. He didn't understand that, and she was off looking at a movie till it dried. And he was so mad he closed the whole set and left. And so she realized she was in the doghouse, so she got the property man to build a doghouse, and 6 men brought it in. And here she came out and she says, "I'm in the doghouse, right, or am I out?" Which was cute. So he broke down laughing. Anyway, a friend of his bought an old truck and brought the truck over and put it in Woody's driveway and left it there. And Woody he didn't have keys or anything like that. He had to have it hauled off and taken someplace. And he figured out in his mind exactly what had happened. No, he had done that to the other fellow. I got that wrong. He had this truck in somebody else's driveway, and the fellow figured out it was Woody that had done that to him. And so the fellow went to the dog pond, and he got all of the dogs out of the pond and put them in this big truck and brought it back to Woody's house. He opened the front door and had all the animals run into the house. Up the stairs, all over everything. And all of his guests were having a fit with all these dogs running around. He says, "Okay, everybody before they leave this house tonight has got to take one of these animals home and keep it." I thought that was a terrific gag. He also scared the young gals that came to work there on the set. When he talked about being on time, he meant it. So he had a gun one time that was just a play gun. And he said very sternly that the actor and the actress had to be there at 7:30 in the morning. Well, the next morning, the actress is there and not the actor. So anyway, he paced up and down and was mad, and everybody was waiting for the fireworks to start here. The man pulls up in a chauffeur-driven car and comes into the set. And Willie pulls out this gun and shoots him. And the guy screams and falls down, scares the young actress to death. She didn't know that this was all played.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
That's great.
They could, every gag they could think of, he did.
That's amazing.
Which made working there fun. You know, it was all part of the family and having a good time. Well, it's a pleasure to see all you people. And I live near Seal Beach, Long Beach, and anybody that ever has a question about those days or something like that is welcome to ask. Is there any questions or anything?
Yeah.
I can't hear very well, so you got to come up here.
Come on up here. You can sit down again, and she'll come up here. That way, we've got the camera and everything.
You don't think I'm going to fall apart?
Oh, I certainly don't. You are one feisty woman. It's just we have the camera set up, so it's all...
Oh, I didn't realize. Oh, my gosh. You got it.
Do you want a cup of water?
No, I'm okay.
Fine.
What I wanted to know,
Here, come on, just come up and stand here, right here.
what I wanted to find out was, how often did you actually get on the sound stage as far, or the
Just when the red light is on, you don't walk on the sound stage. There's 30 of them. When the red light's off, you can open the door, okay? Or the green light's on. So they had double doors. There was like a big square that you could stand in case the red light came on. You couldn't open the second one.
Okay.
Anyway, then you open that, and here was the huge set, much bigger than this room, 6 times as big, high ceiling. And they had one that was just for Esther Williams.
oh, swimming
Yeah,
pool?
it had the full pool, where they could do all these wonderful numbers that Pasternak did, and all the different directors. You know, they had to jump from up here, and
I remember.
it's a big operation. That was stage 30. The one I think that Nelson Eddy might have been on is the opera one. It looked like something at the Met, you know, with all the side boxes,
Okay, yes.
plush. Everything was very plush. That was stage 6. But in delivering mail and things, I went on up to most of the stages. We had 30 seconds over Tokyo, and we had that huge plane. Yeah, that
yes.
Van Johnson was in, or, yeah. That was there, stage 15. This huge plane that they could shoot the picture. Spencer Tracy, I think, was in that, you know.
Was Woody working on a particular film for those last couple of months of 1942?
Journey for Margaret.
We're still finishing that. Did you meet Margaret O'Brien then?
Yes, I saw Margaret O'Brien, of course, around the lot quite a bit. And then in 2002, they had her come to Culver City, and they have a hotel, the Culver Hotel there. And she was there as an older woman, which was interesting. Yeah, after all these years. She lives in Palm Springs, I think.
But she's still, I know, I've met her, and she...
Well, you can see it's Margaret O'Brien.
Yes. She still has that childlike quality to her. It's amazing.
Yes, yeah. She's slight build.
Yeah. Did Woody ever talk about what he thought the impact of that film would be? Because that turned out, that film got tremendous reviews, and it was quite poignant because of when it was released.
Yeah. No, he didn't. No, he didn't.
Any other things that you remember?
Last time you were on, how long did you work there?
Oh, how long did you work at MGM?
I worked the first time 21 years, and Eddie Mannix passed away, heart attack, and I handled the funeral and did everything that was necessary. And then I didn't have the heart to start with another producer, so I left MGM. That was in 1963. Probably left October 10th, too. I always had October 10th. Anyway, and I had 2 children, so I stayed home for 15 years. Then I'm told these friends, I just called the studio after 15 years, got the head of the script department on the phone, and just said my background quickly. And he said, well, I'm in a hurry. And my secretaries left, and I said, well, how about me? And he told me to come in and be interviewed, and he hired me the same day. So all of a sudden, boom. Just by making one telephone call, I had the good fortune to be included again at the studio. And of course, this was really interesting. I started to tell them, everybody formerly had been very creative. Now I'm walking into the studio and I'm looking at all these men. They're corporate lawyers. This is not the same people that were there originally. Extremely different types of people. It had changed that much in 15 years. Wow. And they looked at things differently. It's like the head of Disney now. Iger. This is a corporation man. This is not a creative man that had done motion pictures. Mayer was different because he had a creative part of him. He wasn't just looking at the money part of it. He always said that he didn't want a movie made that wasn't acceptable to his daughters.
Right.
So, as far as sexual content, bad language, anything like that, you never saw that in the original films. That was not acceptable. You never saw anything not acceptable.
Except one line in Gone with the Wind,
Yeah. Anyway,
which he paid a penalty to use.
Tell them about when Ted Turner took over and you went to Atlanta and his infatuation with Gone with the Wind, and his home.
what?
The story you told me about Ted Turner with Gone with the Wind, and you went back there and you saw his
Well,
home.
Ted Turner, who created, his father sold ads on billboards. So his father was in advertising. This is how he made his money. He belonged to the yacht club, everything. So he was well off. The son, Ted Turner, was sent to an academy to be brought up. He had quite a disposition, I guess, too. He wasn't easy to handle as a kid, I don't know. But he went to work for his father, and he was in the office learning, and his father committed suicide for some reason. Ted all of a sudden had the business in his early 20s, and it was selling. This is what they did. He got the suggestion from somebody about a satellite and how this could revolutionize advertising. So he created Turner Broadcasting Systems. This is what he functioned under. He owned a building that is Techwood today that looks like a colonial plantation. So I think he had in his mind Gone with the Wind. Margaret Mitchell, of course, had authored that and written at that time. Anyway, he had a romantic interest in Gone with the Wind. And he was fascinated with the times and everything. And he was interested in MGM because we released the picture and had control of it. So he bought, in 1986, he was able to purchase MGM with Mr. Krikorian, and I was at the studio with the man that had to explain to Ted Turner what he bought. How many acres and how many stages and what money was involved. Kirk Krikorian told him there were 4 pictures in the can that were made that would pay to keep the doors open at the studio. Well, they all failed. So at that time, he had TBS and he had CNN, which he had the idea for the 24-hour news wheel, as we called it. so much time for news, so much time for the commercial, and there, so anyway, he lost the studio after about 6-7 months, but he did retain, not the property, Kerkorian got most of it back again, but he did retain the film industry, the film library. And that's what my boss had control of. He formed a company, and this is what we handled, was storing the film, releasing the film, duplicating the film, selling the tapes, copyrights for new versions of the stories. We also had all the original scripts that were done on onion skin that have to be transferred, just like the negatives have to be transferred to new film and renewed all the time. So it was a big operation that we handled. Ted, bless his soul, had made the right decision originally, even though he had to sell bonds and everything else to get back on his feet again. He came out smelling like a rose because he created TNT and he created Turner Classic Movies. He bought Hanna-Barbera at the end there when they wanted to retire. So he had all of these functions that he had control of. Then he merged with Time Warner, and that's when things changed a great deal, because they eventually got control, the people at Warner's, of what he had. He remained on the board and was a big stockholder, but he was eventually eliminated.
I have a question. Why did MGM not set up a studio tour and do the whole thing that Universal did?
Never charged, and we never went in. Lou Wasserman decided to do that, and it was very inexpensive originally. You probably paid $250 or something like that to go through the studio, and eventually it's now, what is it, 100 and something?
Go to Universal, yeah.
And he played to it. He set it up over there at Universal, so that made it interesting. We never did that.
It's a shame, because if you take the Sony tour, they say under the ground, under this floor is the yellow brick road, and you're like, can we please see the yellow brick road? I don't want to see this floor that's
They
there.
had nothing to do with that. You're talking about Wizard of Oz.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, at MGM. At MGM, where the stuff is hidden under other stuff.
The Eastern executives wanted us to keep it very definitely, but that was Kerkorian that did that. He also had the auction and auctioned off all of the costumes that he auctioned up for Debbie Reynolds, bought quite a bit of it. Anybody could have bought it that had the money. But then Culver City has a few of the outfits still that they have in glass cases, but you have to maintain all that. And I asked Debbie one time, I said, what happened to all your collection? Because she moved it to Las Vegas and she had it on thing. And she says, I can't store it. Jane Withers bought all the dolls that I've ever seen in this world. And then she had to get a storeroom to house it, take care of it. It's expensive. So Debbie sold it to somebody in Tennessee, and he has a thing. So it will never come back to Hollywood. She kept bothering Roger Mayer that I worked for, The Last Man, to please take it for the Kodak Museum, and they wouldn't put out the money to her. They wouldn't pay her. So she sold it to the man in Tennessee, and that's where it is, someplace. I've never seen the display back there, but I saw it in Vegas. I sold her a tapestry that came down from my husband's family, and it looked like the Sheik of Araby you know, the sand and the palm trees and this beautiful sheik getting off a horse. Anyway, she said, this is wonderful. And so she bought that. So that's the story of what happened with Chad. He's in Montana still. He's in the bison business now. Sells bisons. So bison food.
Oh, Ted Turner?
Yeah.
He sells
Yes,
bison?
restaurants. He had about 14 at one time because I kept friendly with secretaries.
June, what was it you were talking about when, just before Woody Van Dyke passed away, he sent his family away or something like that?
Yeah, come on back.
Yeah.
Tell them. And then we'll wrap up. Yeah.
He had them go out there because he felt something was, I don't know, going to happen. I don't know why he did that, but no one will ever know. And Howard Strickling never wrote a book or said anything about it, and neither did Mr. Mayor. So maybe they had a confidence with him that he wouldn't say anything.
June, did you want to explain what your sister wrote out?
I can't explain that because that's historical to your aunt. Do you understand it? Yeah. So I wanted him to know what my sister had written and what she felt was the ancestry. His grandmother, I guess it would have been Woody's grandmother, came on a covered wagon to Carson City. Isn't that what you got out of that? And had some mining rights?
Yes.
Right. And then was located in San Diego.
San Diego, yes.
It was interesting. Do you all know Hotel del Coronado?
Yes, yes.
His parents were the first ones in the bridal suite. I mean, not his parents.
Grandparents.
Yeah. Not Woody, but his mother and dad.
Wow. Sharon probably would like.
So when you go to Hotel del Coronado, they should have a picture of the couple. I'm sure they were beautiful looking.
Yeah.
All right, any last questions?
So that's the 1800s. That's how long that hotel has been there.
Yeah.
It's kind of remarkable, isn't it?
Especially in
Still-
California where we tear down our landmarks.
That's really unusual.
Yes.
No, but I'll be happy to answer any questions if you have anything else, but it really is.
Yes. He wants to know if you know any other stories regarding Nelson or Jeanette.
No, not really. I feel that he was an opera singer. He was going to be an opera singer and stay in New York, probably. He probably would have been very happy. But he was called out here by the Philharmonic Orchestra to perform. And that's when a talent scout saw him. And he remained in Hollywood then and Brentwood for the rest of his life. But he got more coverage, I think, than somebody with the Opera House. So he was fortunate, too, that he was well known. And also Jeanette. Wasn't she wonderful in San Francisco and the wonderful things that she did? So she'll never be forgotten.
All right.
She was not a very big person, I don't think. I don't have the impression that she was very big. He was good size.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's it.
Any other?
Who was the bigger star, Jeanette or Deanna Durbin?
Who was the big, what?
Who was the bigger star, Jeanette or Deanna Durbin?
Well, in my life, Jeanette MacDonald, you know.
Correct
Because I think she did very diverse roles, more so than Diana Durbin. Shirley Temple was very unusual, I thought, as a child star, my gosh.
Yes.
But it was interesting that the MGM used to, well, look at Our Gang Comedy. All of those kids were able to get on screen. And that was fun pictures. I don't think those are ever shown anymore. None of those original ones by
They were
Hal
shown,
Roach.
yeah, they were shown when we were kids on television.
You see Harold Lloyd. Those films, but you don't see the kids' films anymore, you know. So that's too juvenile, I guess. But I think it's wonderful that they have copies of all these things. The only thing is trying to get them to run, you know, having something to run.
Just wanted to keep the microphone up to your
I just wanted to keep the microphone by you.
Oh, well, that's all. It's just that entertainment, thank God for entertainment.
And thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for speaking with us today. Thank you. Very much appreciate it. Thank you.